There is a quiet ache that settles over the soul when grief arrives. It does not knock nor ask permission. It simply comes through death, illness, distance, betrayal, or the silent erosion of something you once held sacred. Agape love, in such times, is not a radiant sun, but rather a lantern, small, persistent, often flickering. Grief reveals itself in many forms. It may arrive with the finality of a casket, or in the empty space left by a relationship that unraveled slowly. It may haunt the hallway where your child used to sing, or in the silence when someone who once promised loyalty no longer calls. Agape love meets all of these losses with unwavering dignity, not to erase pain, but to companion it. Agape does not rush grief, nor does it shame sorrow. It does not say move on, or at least you still have. It does not compare wounds. Instead, agape sits beside you at the bedside of your unspoken pain. There's grief that comes from dreams unrealized, from never becoming a mother, from not finishing the degree, from watching a career end before it flourished. Some grieve a home they had to leave, or a town that never felt like theirs. Others mourn the life they imagined by a certain age, the relationship that never came. Loving others in grief is a sacred test of agape. It's hard to show up for someone else when your own heart is bleeding. But love in grief is not performance. It is not always the casserole or the clean house. Sometimes it's simply not leaving. Sometimes it's holding space for someone else's memory, even when your own is already too full. Agape in grief may look like listening without redirecting the conversation to yourself. It may be as quiet as lighting a candle in memory of someone else's father, or walking a friend's dog when they don't have the strength to leave the house. It may mean remembering a date that matters deeply to someone who feels the world has moved on. But just as we are called to love others in their grief, we must also learn the gentle discipline of loving ourselves in our own. Grief does strange things to the mind and body. You may feel forgetful, detached, irritable. You might cry in the grocery store, or feel nothing at all. You might be tired beyond reason. Loving yourself in grief means offering yourself permission to be human. It means refusing to shame yourself for not bouncing back. It is recognizing that your soul is doing the sacred work of reorienting itself after loss, and that takes time. Loving yourself in grief might mean saying no to things that drain you. It might mean getting help. It might mean letting your house be messy, or asking someone to bring you dinner without guilt. It might mean choosing stillness instead of productivity, or it might mean diving into work as a way of grounding. It will look different for everyone. Some grief is loud and public. Other grief is invisible, like mourning the person you used to be before trauma, or mental illness changed your personality. Some people grieve not having the kind of parents that others seem to have, or having had to parent their own parents. Some grieve childhoods that were stolen, or voices that were never heard. Agape love says, all of this matters. You matter. Your pain is not irrelevant just because it doesn't fit neatly into a box. Grief is also complicated by relationships that are not black and white. How do you grieve someone who caused you pain? How do you honor love when the person also brought suffering? Agape love does not lie or sanitize the past. It tells the truth in compassion. It mourns what was good and names what was broken. It refuses to let bitterness be the only legacy. But neither does it romanticize cruelty. There's a specific grief that comes when someone says they will be there for you, and they are not. When promises are broken, not with malice, but with indifference. When people disappear, not because they died, but because it was inconvenient to stay. This grief is quiet, often unseen, yet it leaves a lasting scar. Agape does not call that scar petty, it names it betrayal, but it also whispers that even though others failed you, love itself never will. Agape is not afraid of grief's messiness. It doesn't flinch at your tears, your anger, your numbness, or even your inability to pray. It sits with you in the night not to solve, but to witness. That, in and of itself, is healing. Agape does not abandon, even when you doubt it. Especially then. There are also times when grief feels cyclical. Just when you think you're okay, it returns. A smell, a season, a song. Agape doesn't scold you for going backward. It understands that love leaves echoes and grief will always walk with you in some form. The goal is not to eliminate sorrow, but to live with it in a way that deepens your compassion, not hardens your heart. Loving others after grief often means loving differently. You may love more fiercely, or you may become more cautious. You may struggle to trust again. Agape makes room for that. It does not demand perfection. It simply calls us to choose love, even in small, halting ways, again and again. It is not always grand. Sometimes agape is simply responding to a text, even when you're tired. Sometimes it's not lashing out when you're grieving and someone says the wrong thing. Sometimes it's choosing not to isolate forever, even when you're scared. Sometimes it's holding someone else's grief when yours still aches. There are griefs that never fully resolve. The loss of a spouse, the death of a child, a diagnosis that changes your entire life. You do not get over these things. You learn to carry them. Agape gives you the strength to carry them with dignity. Agape is also what allows you to believe you are still worth loving in your grief, that you are not a burden, that your pain does not make you unworthy of friendship, affection, companionship, or joy, that you are not broken beyond repair. In fact, agape insists that the broken heart is often the most open. It is through the cracks that light comes. Grief does not make you less worthy. It makes you more capable of loving deeply, honestly, with reverence for the sacredness of life. There is grief that comes with watching someone else suffer, when you can't fix it, when you feel helpless. Agape reminds us that being present matters more than being perfect, that listening matters more than fixing, that sitting silently next to someone in pain is holy work. There's also the grief of watching your child grieve, or seeing someone you love spiral into depression or addiction. Agape doesn't look away. It doesn't rescue in a codependent way, but it doesn't abandon either. It walks with, without controlling. It prays, weeps, hopes, and perseveres. Sometimes grief becomes part of your identity. Agape ensures it doesn't become your entire identity. It is part of your story, but it is not the only chapter. Agape helps you write new pages, not to erase the old ones, but to continue the narrative with meaning. Agape love also allows you to forgive yourself in grief, for what you said, for what you didn't say, for the moment you laughed when you thought you shouldn't, for the birthday you forgot while buried in sadness, for the way you snapped at someone because you were in pain, for not being able to be there for others the way you used to. It is a powerful thing to learn that you do not need to be fully healed to be a vessel of love, that you can love while limping, that your sorrow does not disqualify you from service, kindness, or laughter. In fact, it often qualifies you more deeply. Grief humbles us. It teaches us that we are not in control, that life can change in a moment, that people are more fragile and precious than we realized. Agape teaches us not to cling, but to cherish, not to possess, but to bless. And when someone else's grief is invisible or hard to understand, agape believes them anyway. Agape doesn't need proof. It doesn't say at least it wasn't worse. It doesn't dismiss their sorrow, just because it doesn't mirror your own. It simply shows up and stays. To live with agape in times of grief is to live with courage. It is to walk barefoot over shattered dreams and still find the strength to carry a cup of comfort to someone else. It is to weep without shame, to love without conditions, and to endure with a heart cracked open, not closed off. In grief, there will be days you feel like giving up. Agape will not let you, not because it scolds you into strength, but because it offers you presence. It reminds you that you are not forgotten, that even in your loneliest hour, love itself holds you. And that is enough for today. Just today, one day at a time, one breath at a time. Agape walks with you, always.